here today with Sarah Sparks, who is an award-winning executive coach, speaker and author. And her recent book, Stop, The Calmer Way to Future-Proof Your Career and Wellbeing, was the winner of the Wellness and Wellbeing category in the Business Book Awards 2022. Passionate about helping busy professionals have career success as well as health and wellbeing, Sarah has held senior management roles in demanding organisations like Goldman Sachs, but paid the price of not having a sustainable strategy and burning out. And she now works with busy professionals to help them get it right and not make the mistakes that she made. So first of all, welcome to the show, Sarah. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you.
And first of all, congratulations. How did it feel?
I know. But I have to say, I was completely and utterly surprised. I had no expectations. I was very delighted to be on the shortlist. I had no expectations of being a winner. And in fact, I was sitting next to my sister and she had to dig me in the ribs. She said, "It's your book. Get up there." So I was completely surprised, but delightfully so.
Yeah, it was a wonderful evening, wasn't it?
It really was a wonderful evening. Yeah. And I'm rather hoping I might be able to be a judge this time round.
Oh, brilliant. I shall see you there. Marvellous. So what I'd love to do as well is just ask you to tell us a little bit more about your story, because I always say, the author's story is an essential part of any business book, but yours more than most, because it really laid the foundation for everything, didn't it?
It did, and I don't think I could have written the book if I hadn't experienced burnout firsthand. And I mean proper burnout, as in I was hospitalized with burnout, and it was such a shock to me because I, first and foremost, was so unaware about the way I was working and how the impact that had. So at the time, I was about 35 years old. I'd been recently promoted. I'd recently got married. I was trying to be the best person and best version of me to everyone around me. And on reflection, there was years I hadn't been sleeping properly and snatching at sleep. And I thought it really wasn't very valuable to have sleep. And so I thought I could just keep working through. And towards the end, my breathing became erratic. And I was very snappy with people. And I don't, I'm not like that now. But back then I was. And I was completely shocked when I found myself in hospital and had no idea how I got there.
I mean, it's such a dramatic story. You collapse at work and you wake up in hospital. I mean, I don't know what I thought burnout was, but I've never really thought of it in that moment of absolute snapping.
Yes. And of course, I had all of the feedback. My body had given me lots of feedback along the way, which I had ignored. And towards the end, I seem to remember, not being able to read the words on a page that were all swimming about, or the ones that I could read just wouldn't stay in. So I kept rereading sentence after sentence and getting nowhere. So I was really, cognitive function was just out of the window. And it really was a collapse. And my body had said, "You're not listening to the signs. I'm going to have to give you a proper warning.
Ignore this."
And yes, I had no choice but to wake up at that point. And I do remember feeling that I didn't have a choice. I felt that this is how I had to work. And then my consultant at the hospital pointed out, actually, work was not meant to make me sick, And that was such a wake-up call. Oh, you're so right. It's not meant to put me in an early grave or anything. I'm meant to be doing my stuff, but not at my own physical detriment. So that really was a wake-up call. And that was when I decided, actually, I needed to put myself on the priority pile. And the decision is easy, but carrying it out is so much more difficult.
And you make the point that other people can feel you've broken a contract there by
indeed
negotiating the rules.
Whether it was my husband didn't like the fact that actually I was putting myself first, and I was a changed woman. My family didn't like it. Particularly my work colleagues were getting a different version of me when I went back. And I really had to hold my ground because it took me a long time to get well again. And if I hadn't put myself on the priority pile, I probably wouldn't have made it as soon as I did, which was a long time. So yes, it was hard. And I'm still on the journey, for heaven's sake. I fall off the wagon all the time. And I know that I on occasions work too hard, and I nearly have to stop and say, okay, right, prioritize what is really important to me and how I'm going to make sure that I can be my best self, because you end up being a very poor version of yourself.
Well, and let's go there. You say, stop and let's prioritize. So tell us, what is your stop system? Just sort of introduce it briefly for us.
The stop concept.
Mm.
Well, in my what I now know that I didn't know back then was that we are designed for chronic stress. Not chronic stress. We're designed for stress, acute episodes of stress. But what we're not designed for is chronic episodes of stress. That's stress after stress and after stress. And that's what most people are living with day in, day out. That's why the World Health Organization now recognizes work-related stress as a syndrome.
It's a
Um,
lifestyle choice, isn't it?
well, it's an interesting use, isn't it? It doesn't feel like a choice. You
Yeah.
really feel that actually we're on this in this always on world with all sorts of uncertainty and demands and wars around the world and climate change, lots of things that cause people anxiety and stress. And unless we stop and bring down those stress hormones, then we are on the road to burnout. Because when we are stressed, stress hormones go around our bodies and help us have supernatural powers to run fast and get out of the way of the danger, or to freeze so we don't feel the pain when somebody's actually eating us up. That's, believe it or not, why we freeze. But all of the other helpful systems shut down. So our reproductive system shuts down, our immune system shuts down, our digestive system shuts down, and our ability to have high cognitive function shuts down. We don't need those things when we're running from a bear. But if we're doing that day in, day out, no wonder we're ill. No wonder people have all sorts of problems as a consequence of chronic stress. So it is a really fundamental thing to stop and bring down the stress hormones. So I wrote the book for my younger self, somebody who was a 35-year-old thinking that she had everything sorted, but never stopped to bring down the stress hormones because I didn't know I had to, or didn't know I should do. And so the stop concept is, how can you bring down the stress hormones in different aspects to deal with yourself, to deal with time, to deal with others, and having this high performance mindset. So that's the STOP.
And obviously, you need to go and read the book, people, to find out the whole thing. But could you just maybe share sort of one tip that perhaps surprises people, or one tip that surprised you when you discovered it?
I think the one that surprised me most, it really shouldn't, and that's breathing. We talked a bit this right at the very beginning, you and I, before we came on air. This idea that actually, if we breathe and just take a moment, even if we do it right now, just you and I and the audience, we can feel differently. And it really has a very profound, it is the quickest way of bringing down the stress hormones. And of course, we're breathing all the time, but how are you breathing? Are you hyperventilating like I was? Or are you taking those deep belly breaths where you can actually bring down the stress hormones? And no one else needs to know. And that's the other fantastic thing about that little.
It's so
No one else.
accessible there, isn't it? Yeah.
Anytime, any place, anywhere. Just breathe.
And actually, one of the things that struck me most throughout the book was the power of the physical on your emotional and mental state, which again, I sort of knew, but it was really, the sleep, the breathing, just that we think of ourselves as sort of brains walking around on legs, don't we? But we are so embodied. And yeah, it was a great reminder.
Mm. Yeah. And I think that's when people think about their health and well-being, it's almost from the neck downwards, isn't it? We think, I'm going to go to the gym and tone those muscles. I'm going to eat well. And even the sleeping, we're kind of thinking, I need to rest. But actually, we're not really thinking about, okay, how is our brain functioning? Is it functioning well? What can I do to help it on its way? And all of those things like exercise and nutrition and hydration help. But we really do need to give our brains a rest. And, that's why sleep is important. But so many other things. Rest is something that sportsmen really value. They know that they are going to be at peak performance if they rest in appropriate times. And yet in the business world, rest and recovery is not often on the radar. And it really needs to
it's
be.
not even that we don't think about it, it's that we downplay it, that we make a badge of honor out of being constantly busy and not only sleeping 4 hours a night. I think that's getting better, but certainly in the past, people bragged about
I
it.
would agree. Yes, and I would be part of that badge of honor group. I really didn't value sleep. But you know what? Deloitte published a report in March of this year talking about burnout being the most dangerous and widely ignored occupational hazard that there is right
Wow.
now, and that 77% of the over 1,000 full-time employees that they surveyed, 77% felt burnout in their current role. And
That's
the thing is,
staggering, isn't it?
I think it is staggering, and so it cannot be ignored by organisations anymore. And I think in the past it might have been, because it would have been just seen as a natural attrition. But when you've got 77% of your employees not functioning well, possibly going to be burning out, long-term sick, it's not something that can be ignored. And that's the other thing that I think, I wrote that book for my younger self and other people going through stressful or working in stressful environments, and there are a lot of them. But actually, people can't solve this problem on their own. It is
It's a
an
systemic
occupational
issue,
thing, and
isn't it?
it is, and there's a really significant imbalance between the demands and the resources that we are having to live through, and so organisations do need to step up.
And it's not just the attrition, it's not just having people off sick, is it? It's actually they're making really poor quality decisions every day, and that's affecting your bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we were a heart surgeon, we wouldn't want that to be the
Yeah.
case. But nor should we within any sort of business environment. Poor decisions and poor leadership has a very profound impact on the bottom line, and also toxic work environments, and people are unhappy doing what they're doing, and that's not okay.
And you make such an interesting point about this being an organisational issue as much as an individual issue. I want to talk to you about writing, because I always want to talk to people about writing. But when you were thinking about the book, when you were planning it, when you were sort of envisaging what you wanted it to do in the world, were you writing for individuals or organisations or both? What was your kind of thought there?
I was very much writing it for the individuals, but there was a chapter that wasn't written. It was written in my head, but not included in the book. And that was all about organisational responsibility, because they do have a duty of care.
Is that the next book?
It is the next book, and I've actually started researching it. This time I'm going to write with a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, because actually I found writing really difficult.
Tell us about that.
Really.
All around the world,
Well,
heads are nodding right now, Sarah. You're in good company, so unburden yourself.
It was like pulling a tooth. Seriously, I had in my mind that I was not a good writer. I didn't enjoy writing at school, didn't enjoy English as a topic. I'm much more of a scientist than a mathematician. So I had in my head and I wasn't a good writer. So that didn't help. I think that's an unhelpful thing. I'm perfectly capable of speaking. So actually, I decided to have a conversation with my audience to help me rather than just write. I was going to have a conversation. So that was one thing that did help. I set aside 6 months to write the book at the beginning of 2020. I got started in February, on the February the 6th, I remember because it was my birthday. And then the world changed. And I found that really hard because I didn't know the environment I was working within. It kind of changed. I didn't know what it was going to look like ultimately. So that really I found difficult. And although I sat down every day to write, some days I would write half a page. Other days, a whole lot came through. But it was interesting on reflection to notice that actually when it happened, and it didn't seem to be something I was in control of, but when it did happen and flow, it came through me. It wasn't me. It was kind of coming through me. So that was delightful. That bit of it was delightful.
It's sort of magical, isn't it? When you look,
engineer it.
Yeah, and you look back over it and you're like, wow, where did that come from? Yeah, that is one of the wonderful things. Yeah. But you also, there's a couple of things that I want to just touch on. First, that discipline of writing down and every day, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but today, tomorrow's a new day. And, so there's a consistency element there. And also going further back, if you didn't like writing, if you thought you were no good at it, what was it that made you think it's worth getting over this and writing a book?
Well, there are a couple of things. So I wanted to speak at my mother's 80th birthday, and I didn't feel I was capable of being a speaker. So I went and did some speaker training. And the training I went on encouraged you to create a model of what was in your head and then talk about it. And the first time I did this, it was in front of 12 people I didn't know. And I got a book writing contract from Capstone Wiley of the first time I spoke about my model in my head. And I thought,
Wow.
oh. I turned it down because actually, for me, what they wanted me to do, I had a young son at the time, was not compatible with my lifestyle. So I turned it down. But that did make me think. And then the first time I spoke in public about it, 1,100 people turned up to listen. And I thought, oh, maybe I have got something that's worth getting out in the world. So it wasn't that I wanted to write a book. It was that I wanted to be able to share
Yes.
what I knew. And so a book was just one way of you condensing it. And I think the fantastic thing about writing a book is you have to get all of those thoughts in some sort of order and structure and things to include and things. And there's so much one can write about any of these topics, but certainly mine. And some of them actually I just let go of, saying actually that's not going to add value or enough value. There's other bits that need to be in here, and I don't want it to be a long read. So it was a good discipline, actually putting it down in paper and not having it just swimming around in my head. So that's why I wrote the book.
You'd say about that advice you had in the speaking training to get a model of what's in your head. That's magic. So I just want to tell me a little bit more about that. And I'm just going to pull this blind down because if you're watching on video, you'll see I look like I have some sort of halo. There we go.
um, well, what can I tell you about it? So my belief now is a model makes something sticky. If you just write about something and it's just free flowing essay, um, I find quite difficult to remember. But if you have an acronym or a visual representation of what your model is, it becomes more sticky, and people can then attach things to it, and therefore it's kind of feels like it's going to be more life changing, if you like, than if I just wrote an article. So for me, the model was a way of making it sticky, but it also made it sticky for me.
Yes.
It made it think, okay, so what could or should go into what bit of the model? What's going to make most sense? What's going to have a bit of a flow? So it was actually helpful for me, particularly my sort of mathematical scientific brain, having something, building blocks that I could put into place. And then it also helped me write because it was only a little bit I was writing. So all of these things I found really helpful.
It's such a powerful, and as you say, it feels really kind of intuitive and obvious once you're kind of the other side of it. But I think if you are at the stage where you've got free flowing stuff in your head, it feels like an insuperable problem. You know, how do I turn this into a model? The visual aspect of that, and you're sort of indicating with your hands there the blocks and how they fit together. I think it's being able to draw it on a page. It just somehow solidifies and makes more concrete the ideas that you've got. And as you say, once you've got it in that more communicable form, it helps you write it, but it also helps other people get it at a stroke. And if you can draw your idea and draw your model for someone, so powerful.
Yeah, I would so agree. And it helps with the hierarchy. You know, what are the key things and what are the things that build up to that? So yes, I found it really helpful to have a model. And it wasn't
Crudely.
it wasn't, I was just challenged to do it. I wouldn't have thought at that point, I hadn't thought about writing a book. So it's really helpful.
Yeah, it's such a great challenge. And crudely, you know, what are the bits and how do they fit together? That's what we're asking ourselves, isn't it? So yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, indeed.
So having come through all this, what as you look back, you know, in a sense, what do you wish you'd known before you started? What's your best tip for an author who's setting out on the journey now?
I think for me, the best tip that I'd like to share is around really understanding your audience, because I could have written burnout for everyone, children, people towards the end of their careers, but I chose to write it for my 35-year-old self. So I really got to know myself again. And I actually, had the same place to sit down and write, which I also found very helpful every day, same position, same place to write. And around me, a bit like I have here, I have all sorts of things on the wall, but around me, I had the attributes of my avatar, if you like. She was 35 years old. She just going places in her career, either newly married or thinking about getting married or wanting to get married. I had everything around me that was me. And I would sit down and I would soak that up and actually try it on for size before I started writing. So I could have that conversation with her rather than a conversation with somebody who is, let's say, 50, but would have gone through that. So I really immersed myself in my audience before I started. And that helped me have a conversation as opposed to try and write.
And that does so many things, doesn't it? Firstly, it makes what you write so much more applicable to the people that you really want to reach, but also it makes you feel more conversational, doesn't it? It makes it more of a real, rather than just standing up behind a lectern and speaking into the void, you're actually having a conversation with somebody you can imagine in front of you. That makes it much more readable.
Well, it certainly made it easier for me to write. And I haven't reread my book recently, but I did pick it up in preparation for our call, thinking, oh, this is put my nose in it. And actually, it made me smile because actually it did feel like I was having a conversation with someone. So it was thinking, oh, that sounds all right. So yes, that would be my first.
I love the idea of current you speaking to previous you as well, that sense of speaking to yourself through time. I quite often speak to future me as well, and
Yes,
it's a really helpful practice. Yeah, brilliant. And I always ask my guests, Sarah, to recommend a business book. You're not allowed, I'm afraid, to recommend Stop. I'll do that for you, but it's very good.
Yeah.
But what book would you recommend that anybody listening should read?
Well, I devour books by audio mostly. And the one that I have gone back to time and time again, and I can see myself reading again, is this one. It's called Essentialism. The Discipline's Pursuit of Less. Has it come up on your...
Greg McEwen. Well, he's actually been a guest on the podcast, which was terrific. So, yeah.
Oh, my mistake. So yes, I think it's an absolutely fabulous book.
Yeah, it is, isn't
and
it?
This concept that most things are noise and very few things are important. But if you actually focus on what's really important and where you can make your biggest contribution and let everything else go, it's such a powerful message.
And ties perfectly into that point that we started with, and that you have choice. And we tell ourselves a million times a day, I have to, I must. You have so much more choice than you realise.
We certainly do have so much more choice than we realise. And there's that concept of living consciously and making those conscious choices rather than allowing... I think he talks about, living by design, not by default. That's such a powerful thing.
Brilliant. Great recommendation. Thank you. And Sarah, if people want to find out more about you, more about Stop, where should they go?
I think the best place to go is actually on LinkedIn, because I keep that going. So Sarah Sparks on LinkedIn would be the best place. And also they want to get... my book comes with a workbook attached, and you can get a copy of the workbook on my website, which is sarahsparks.co.uk.
Perfect. Well, I will put those links up on the show notes at extraordinarybusinessbooks.com, along with the transcript of the conversation. And I don't know about you, I can feel my breath just a bit deeper and a bit slower and a bit calmer just from talking to you. So thank you so much for your time today.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.